Oh yeah, I can see it also. Oh yeah, I can see it also. Philip, that's a good idea. I think for those that are already here, you can start off by just showing them, um, yeah, especially those that haven't activated um, their vouchers and all. So you can share your screen and show it, and maybe you can also record it as well. Brother Lee,
Okay, we will start at 9. At least I think maybe a few people would have joined by 9.
Clinton, you have a very interesting roof there. It's like your roof has got character.
It's gone. It's gone now.
we wanted to just give a little bit of time for everybody to come through. I know we always share the invitation quite late, so some people might, yeah, thanks, Nabutla. Some people might need to take their time before they come through. So we've also sent out Azure passes and manuals to everyone. So if you haven't activated your Azure Pass or the manual, Philip will assist you in that time to just sort of help you understand. Yes, Rodney, go ahead.
Some of us haven't received our Azure passes, so I was wondering if that was delayed or something that could have happened.
Okay, Philip.
Rodney, check your IT Think email. rodney.m@itthink.co.za.
Okay, yeah, I checked. The only thing I received there was a manual, I think. I think I replied on your email yesterday.
Yes, that email, the body contains the pass and everything, and then also that how to create an account on SkillPipe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Philip, the skill pipe is the manual, right? The
Yes.
Azure Pass, what does he also have the Azure Pass? Did you include
Yes, so I sent both. So the first one is the Azure Pass or the voucher code as well as the manual license code. I think I also have access to Rodney's email here. Okay, yeah. Rodney, if you check, the first one, it's written Azure Pass, and then there's a code, and then there's AZ900 manual license code. There are two there. If you can check
yes.
all.
Yes, thank you. I see them.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Phil?
Yes, Titeto.
Okay. I just wanted to find out from Phil, which email address should I use regarding the issue that we spoke privately on WhatsApp about?
Okay, so if you're having issues with your IT Think account, use your personal account to sign up for the manual as well as the Azure passes.
Okay.
Yeah, use your personal account. But remember, it has to be a Microsoft account. If it's not a Microsoft account, you wouldn't be able to use it. But it's a fairly simple process also.
I'll try that, but if I get any challenges, then I'll refer back to you.
All right, cool. Awesome. So, Clinton, the streaming, are we up and running? Alright, so if you're just joining us, training will start at exactly 9:30. We're waiting for a couple of more people to join. And then Clinton, I've just gone up to the live stream on YouTube. There's a lot of noise. I'm not sure where the noise is coming from. Let me share my screen so you can see. Yeah. And then also we will be sharing our YouTube channel on the chat, and we would like if everyone would subscribe so that whenever we're running anything live, you guys will be able to see it as well.
Okay, I think since while the recording is now on, I can just start with the skills pipeline and how to upload the code. Yes, come on.
Emir Shafiq Ohandit.
Well, good, thanks for asking. Just dealing with a crisis, man. That's why I'm so late.
That's okay. We're just giving a little bit more time for everyone else to join us.
To get the manual on the skills pipeline, as well as loading the voucher to your account. I'm just gonna quickly share my screen. So order for you to have the manual, you have to go to skills pipeline. I'm just gonna say skills pipe. And then this would be the website that you should go to. And it's also on the manual that I've sent along with, I sent some document that guides through on how to do this. So in case you don't know which tabs to do, which email to use, we're just gonna do that just before 9:30, before the training begins. Okay. Yeah, this is the first page that you're gonna see. If you already have an account, you can log in. If you don't, you just go to join now, right? And then you'll be required to provide your details. In this instance, I already have an account on my IT Think, so then I'm just gonna use my Gmail account. Okay, and then once you're done, you should do a password that you would remember. Then you register. Then once you have registered, it will take you straight to adding a course. Apologies for, okay, let's see, email address it's already registered. Oh, even on this part, it's already registered. But then since you have seen this process, I'll just show you what you will see once you're logged in. So I'm gonna log in. If you are registering for the first time, the page that you will see will be this one, right? Add a course. After registering, you will see this. So you will use the codes that I've sent you, the license code for AZ900 manual. After adding it, you say redeem, it will tell you that it is successful, or rather, it is successful. And then once it has said that, you click on done, and then it will navigate you back to here, and then here's your manual, and then here's the download. You can be able to download it, or rather you can be able to view it online if you prefer viewing it online, right? And then as you can see, it's on that side, and then you can now read if you prefer to do it online. You can bookmark, you can see the table of contents. So far, I think we have gone through module 1. You can go through whatever you want. Then that's it about the manual, right? And then the second part, it would be to load your Azure voucher, so that you can get the pass to do the labs, or rather the exercises. So in order to do that, we have a link. We will provide the link. I think it was also provided. Apologies for that. So the link that was provided, it's something like this. I just want to show you guys what it looks like. Okay. I will also send it now on the chat, just to make things simpler. Okay. And then so once you are here, you'll just say start. You'll click on start. Do you have any questions? or are there any comments?
Philip,
Okay.
Hi, Philip, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
So I wanted to know how long is this AZ900 course? How long is it gonna last? Does it expire? Here on Skill Pipe?
Yes. Oh,
Is it
there's the book, the manual.
Yeah,
the manual doesn't expire. What expires is the your Azure Pass. It's for 15 days, so you should consume that credit for 15 days before 15 days ends. Yes. So as I've clicked start, then it will take us here where we sign in. You have to use a Microsoft account. Even if you don't have an IT Think account, maybe you can create one, and then you will then have to come back and sign in using that account. Then once you've signed in, if you have an authenticator, you open your authenticator and then you approve. Okay. And then once I've approved, it will then move into the pass itself. Okay, and then you confirm that this is your email address, and you are certain that you are loading it for. You are gonna use it to load the pass, and then you say confirm, and then you will enter the promo code. I've sent the codes to each and every one. So once you have entered, you say claim, and then it will validate. And then once the process is completed, you can go to Azure, and then your email will have a credit that you've been using the promo code. Do we have any questions so far? I guess we don't have any questions, and that's about
yes, Philip, I have a question. Sit here.
Yes, sir. Okay.
I just wanted to just verify that you said the voucher is only valid for 15 days. So that means within the period from when sorry.
No, you can go on. Yes, sir.
I'm saying from the time that you sent the code to us, is the 15 days commenced, or is it only from the period we claim the voucher that the 15 days countdown to write the exam commences?
It will start once you have activated the promo code or the voucher.
Okay, well, thank you.
And then SA2, and also this applies to everyone as well. So the 15-day is the timeline for the voucher, but also remember you have been loaded with a $50 credits. So meaning if you provision any resource and you leave it running, you might run out of money in 1 day or two. So part of what I plan to show you guys today is how to delete your resources, obviously, so that you can preserve the credit that you have for that 15 days, at least long enough for you to be able to practice everything. We're going to be running another Azure course sometimes this month again. So we will share an additional Azure passes with you guys. But it's absolutely important that when you create resources, do not leave them running. The sole purpose of this sponsored Azure Pass is so that you have access to Microsoft Azure and you're able to sort of try out some of the things we'll be doing in the courses. So yeah, remember to always delete them. I will share a script with you guys later on how to delete your resources in Azure.
Okay. Come on. Where is this thing taking time? Oh. License expiry date. I've already sent it. Yeah. Skill pipeline. Yeah. Yeah, so it is up to you which email you wanna use for skills pipeline. it doesn't really depend on, it will just want the license code. But then for Azure, you should use a Microsoft account. So conveniently, you can use the IT thing, or rather you can use yours if you have a Microsoft account. Yeah.
All right, Philip, thank you so much for that presentation. Guys, remember the session is recorded, so if you need additional information, you will be able to go back to it as well. I think we should start. Everyone else will sort of catch up as we go, because we have quite a lot to cover today. We're going to be moving to the second module, and there's a lot of walkthrough that I would like to show, and we also possibly have a hard stop at 12 o'clock.
Gideon, are you breaking?
Am I audible now? Sorry, I seem to have
Yes,
lost
you
my...
are. We lost you there for like the last 30 seconds.
All right, cool. No, thanks a lot. It was just the network from my side. Okay, I'm gonna be sharing my screen. Just give me a minute to do that quickly, and also clean up all the other work stuff that I had opened. Okay, let's see, we still have more people coming through. Okay, Philip, do you know how many people RSVP for the session?
The RSVP has to be with Clinton.
All right, cool. Okay, no problem. So good morning, ladies and gents. Thank you again for joining us for this second session for our AZ900 training, online training. I hope most of you have been able to go through some of the content that we went through in the last session. So this is the second day of training. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we have a recording. You can find this recording on the IT Think website, on our YouTube site. So if you go on YouTube and you type IT Think Smart Solutions, we have a YouTube channel, and we'll be publishing the first session on that channel as well. So today we are going to be talking about the core Azure services. So last week, in our first session, we sort of went through all of the different concepts of Azure, the public cloud, the private cloud, the hybrid. We also spoke about some of the differences between the two, and we looked at some of the concept, and I showed the demonstrations where I set up a virtual network, set up some virtual machines. Today we have quite a few things that we need to go through. So in our outlines today, the first thing that we're going to talk about is basically the Azure architectural components. So there's quite a few core Azure resources that we would need to look at today. The first one is going to be compute. These are your virtual machines. We're also going to look at the networking side of things and look at storage. We're also going to look at some demonstrations around how to create Microsoft SQL databases in the cloud. And most importantly, we would also have a look at some of the architectural component. So the idea of regions, availability zones, subscriptions, resource groups, management groups, and so on and so forth. So the expected outcome is, at least at the end of module 2, you know what an Azure region is, and you know what an availability zone is in a region. You also know what a subscription is, and obviously you know how to sign up to get a subscription. Resource groups are very important. You would also understand how to use resource group to organize your resources. And from a walkthrough point of view, I'm going to be showing you guys how to set up some compute services in Azure. So this will include a virtual machine, it would include a container, websites or in app services, and several other things as well. We would also look at how to set up a virtual network and set up 2 virtual machines and then communicate between the 2 virtual machines. We would also then look at how to set up different types of storage in Microsoft Azure. And so let's begin by first of all looking at some of the core architectural component. So the objectives of the architectural component is 1, regions and regions pairs, availability zones, Azure resources, resource group, resource manager, subscription. I will accompany pretty much each and every single one of the concepts with the demonstrations to try and take it home. So basically, when you talk about Azure regions, you are literally talking about a data center in a particular physical location. So it's Azure offer more global regions than other cloud provider within 60 plus regions represented over 140 countries. So an Azure region is essentially a physical data center in a particular location across the world. And one of the reasons why Microsoft Azure obviously is so popular is obviously because they have more regions than most Azure or cloud providers in the market. So a data center is a physical building with servers in it. And when you talk about regions, you're literally talking about one or more data center that are in close proximity. So if you take, for example, in South Africa, South Africa would represent a region, and we also have a data center in Johannesburg. We have data center in Cape Town. We will talk about availability zone later on and what it really means. Also, a region provides flexibility and scale to reduce customer latency. If the only region that was available was in the US, the increased latency will affect the performance for accessing compute resources within that region. So Microsoft literally would come to your country and they would set up a data center and bring you and set up a bunch of servers in there and then make it available as a region in the Microsoft Azure portal. So if you look at the image in the top right corner, all the blue sections that you're looking at represent all the available regions today. So we have one in Brazil, South Africa, Brazil South, and we have 2 regions in South Africa as well. So one in Cape Town and another one in Johannesburg. So one of the benefits obviously is also to preserve data residency with a comprehensive compliance offering. For some of you who are aware of what POPI is, in South Africa, POPI basically, it's a government regulations that confines you to restrain some local informations within the country and also to protect personal information. This affects pretty much everything that has to do with cloud storage. So in the last 2-3 years, a lot of the government agencies in South Africa have refused to move anything to the cloud because we didn't have a data center in South Africa. But now, with the presence in Cape Town and Johannesburg, we have seen some progression in terms of resources and managed services being moved to the cloud. So this is one of the benefits that you get for localizing a data center within the country as well. So Microsoft also set up what is called a region pair, and a region pair is another data center within the same region. So for example, the South Africa would be a region, and South Africa would have a region pair in the same country as well. They're usually like 300 miles apart, which is about 480 kilometers apart. So if you have a data center in Johannesburg and another one in, for example, Durban, that would sort of represent a region pair. And the region pair would have a high-speed communications with very low latencies between the two regions, and it would automatically replicate your data and your resources across those regions as well. This is essentially created to provide resiliency and also to provide redundancy in case there is any physical or any disaster in one region. You will still be able to access your resources in those other regions as well. So some of the things that you need to know about region pair: one, at least there are 300 miles of separations between them. They have automatic replications for services that are created in one region, and it gets replicated to the other region pair as well. Also, it prioritizes region recovery in the event of outage. So what this means is that if there is an outage, there would still be at least one region providing business continuity for some of the managed services that are running in the cloud. Microsoft also make it a point to roll out updates sequentially, so that if you have a region with two region pairs, for example, they would roll out updates in one region. Once the update is completed, they would carry on the other regions as well. So this is absolutely very important. So we also have other concepts that you can configure within Azure that affects how your region is actually managed. The first one is basically availability option. So if you set up a single virtual machine, that single virtual machine would maintain a 99.9% uptime. I actually would like to share a website called Uptown. I think it's availability. Okay, I would look up the website and I'll share it with you guys later on. But in that website, you'll be able to check what an availability percentage that you're looking at looks like. But I think 99.9% availability simply means that you can only, in a year, you would have maybe an allowed downtime of about maybe 4 days, 45 minutes and a couple of seconds. And 99.99 would probably be about 45 minutes downtime for the whole year. So this basically affects the amount of uptime your services and your service will be. So when you are setting up a virtual machine, later on I'll be showing you guys how to set up a virtual machine. You would have the option of setting up a single virtual machine with no availability option. Technically what this means is that your virtual machine does not have any redundancy of any sort. If the virtual machine gets shut down, or if the region is experiencing some downtime, your virtual machine would not be available. However, if you choose an availability zone option, your virtual machines will be replicated to 3 different zones. This will protect your managed services from outage, especially if there's any physical or any data center failure as well. So if you look in the middle there, you have 3 different sections. Each of the sections represent your virtual machines, and those virtual machines are basically located in 3 different availability zones as well. There's also the possibility of multi-region or multi-region disaster recovery, where data from one region is replicated to another region. This is called the regional protections with data residency boundaries. This would allow you to ensure that your virtual machine is available at all times. So let's talk about availability zone. The whole concept of availability zone is to provide protection against downtime due to data center failure. And like I mentioned earlier, in every region there is at least 3 availability zones. And remember, the availability zones will provide a copy of data from one data center to the other as well. They are physically separate data center within the same region, and each data center is equipped with independent power, cooling, and networking, and they are connected through a private fiber optic network with very low latency. So in South Africa, an example would be if there was a data center in Johannesburg, you would have those data centers would be separated in different buildings. So you would probably have 3 different data center buildings. The first building would be availability zone 1, zone 2 would be the second building, and zone 3 would be the third building. And each building would have its own cooling systems, it would have its own power system, and it would have its own networking as well. And connected between these 3 different buildings would be a very fast fiber optic network, which basically replicates your data from one zone to another as well. Now, let's talk about Azure resources. Any questions relating to regions and region pairs and availability zones? Okay, Rodney, I see your hand up.
Okay, thank you. Is it possible that both regions can be down at the same time?
Anything is possible, but it's unlikely. So the idea is that if you have a region with a data center, that particular region would have availability zones. And availability zones will be 3 different data centers in that location. So for example, if Johannesburg was a region, or Johannesburg South or North was a region, there would be a minimum of 3 data centers here in Johannesburg, which would mean if one data center is down, you still have 2 data centers in that region to provide continuity of business. So a data center is essentially a physical building with infrastructure within it, and this infrastructure represents things like virtual machines or physical machines that provide support for your managed services. So obviously, if there is a natural disaster like an earthquake, for example, obviously you would there's a possibility that you would lose the entire region. Is that clear?
Yes, thank you.
All right, cool. All right, any other questions? We will, when I start creating some of the Azure resources, I will expand a little bit more on some of the functionality. Now let's talk about Azure resources. So an Azure resource is a managed item. It's basically a unit of configurable items within Azure. There are components like storage, virtual machine, networks, and they support your quest to build any cloud solutions. So when you go into the Azure portal and you create a virtual machine is seen as an Azure resource. When you create a storage account is seen as an Azure resource. When you create a virtual network, this is seen as an Azure resource as well. And then we also have a concept called resource group. So a resource group is a logical container and is used for aggregating resources in a single unit. So for example, you can create a resource group to manage one or more resources, and you can use it to assign permissions to an individual responsible for managing those resources as well. A scenario will be an example where you have a personnel within your company who is responsible for managing all virtual machines, and then you can create a resource group and put all virtual machines in there, and they will be responsible for managing all the item in that resource group. Another scenario would be, for example, if you have a test environment, you can have a resource group for test, and every single resource related to test will be created in that resource group. You can also have a resource group for production environment, and then you can basically have all your production machines in there as well. Let's take an example of what a resource is. So if you are logged into the Azure portal, you can create a resource by clicking on the create resource, and pretty much everything that you see here is a resource. So an analytical service, a blockchain category would have one or more resources. AI and machine learning would have one or more resources, and then compute will also have one or more resources as well. So if you create a Windows Server data center virtual machine or resource, this will represent an individual resource that can be managed. So when you think about resource, think about every single managed item from within Microsoft Azure. And when it comes to resource group, for example, in our last presentation, I showed you guys how to set up a resource group. And the way that you set up a resource group is by creating a resource group. So I can come in here and create a resource group. And then you can see currently I have 3 resource groups. And if you click on any of the resource groups, you will see items that are stored inside of that resource group as well. And then when you create your own resource group, and in fact, I am going to create a resource group that we're going to store everything that I'm going to create throughout the session today in this particular resource group. When you create a new resource group, the first thing you need to specify is your subscription. This is our Azure Pass subscription, and I'm going to call this our trainee AZ900 resource group, and then everything related to that particular training would be stored inside of this resource group as well. We also spoke earlier about regions, and we said that regions represent a physical locations where a Microsoft data center is located. An example is basically a bunch of all these regions that you have here. And for latency purposes, it's always advisable to choose a region that is closer to you. But in our case, I'm just going to choose the East US, and then I'll click on the next button. We'll talk about tags later, and then I'll click on the finish. And here, if you see a validation pass, it means that everything configured is correct, and you can go right ahead and you can create that resource group. Okay, once your resource group is created, your resource group is going to start out with nothing in it. On the left-hand side, you can see the overview, the summary of the resource group. The resource group itself, it's a resource. It's just a logical unit of resources. You can see all activities related to the resources shows up here. So if someone assigns permissions to the resource, if someone creates an item in the resource group, those activities will sort of show up here. One of the major component or one of the major use of resource group is to be able to assign permission. So if I have more than one user in this Azure subscription and I would like to assign them the ability to be able to manage item within the resource group, I would do that from the access control I am here. So when you come in there, you can see you can add a role assignment, you can manage access, you can also manage identity as well. You can find a particular user, and then you can give those users specific permissions there. All right, so now that we have created our resource group, we're going to carry on, and there's going to be a couple of other resources that we're going to be setting up in this resource group. So some example of a resource, basically it's a virtual machine. This is a virtual emulation of a computer with an operating system. Another is a storage account. A storage account, it's a component that represents the storage facility that is available to your subscription. And a virtual network represents a logical network where all local communications of computers happen. And app services contains 4 different components. So websites is part of an app service. Mobile is also part of an app service, and later on we will be creating one or more app services just to see an example. A SQL database obviously represents a managed SQL server. This would basically create a database for you, and you can access the database and access the content of that database as well. We also spoke about an Azure function. This is basically a serverless function that you can create in Microsoft Azure. So we've looked at the resource group and we've looked at how to create one. And it's really important that you know that a resource can only exist in only one resource group. So you cannot create a virtual machine for example, and put it in two different resource groups. So a virtual machine can only be home to a single resource group. And then also resource group can exist in different regions as well. So you can create resource A in one region and resource B in another region. And then resources can be moved to a different resource group. So if you decide that you want to move a storage account from one resource group to another, you are more than welcome to do that. This platform supports it. So you can have as many resource groups as you want. So you can basically use resource groups to basically organize your environment the way that you see fit. Although there are other ways in which you can organize your environment that we're going to talk about, but resource group will be one of them as well. If you look on the right hand side, you can see two different models for organizing your resources. Here at the top, you have a resource group that contains your web, your DB, your VM, your storage in one resource group. And if you look at the bottom, you can see that you can create a resource group specifically for the web and the database, and another resource group for the virtual machine, and another resource group for the storage as well. And each and every single one of this resource group can exist in multiple different regions. But it is advisable, especially if you have a virtual machine that is part of a web architecture or a deployment, to co-locate them in the same region so you can reduce the latencies between those two, between the communications of the virtual machines. So let's talk about what an Azure Resource Manager is. So every single time I create an item or I create a resource in the cloud to an Azure Resource Manager. So the question is, what is an Azure Resource Manager, right? So an Azure Resource Manager provides a management layer that enables you to be able to create, update, and delete resources in your Azure subscription. You can create, configure, and delete resources in resource group. You can organize resources. You can control access to resources. And it is usually referred to as ARM, which basically provides a management layer across all the resources in your Azure subscription. If you look at the image or the diagrams that you're looking at here, the Azure Resource Manager is that small little blue thing that you see there. It's got an endpoint that allows you to be able to submit a request from Azure Portal. Excuse me. So if you log into Azure Portal and you create a virtual machine, when you hit the Create button, you are literally submitting that request to an Azure Resource Manager. The Azure Resource Manager obviously has the ability to create one or more resources. Hence, you have the data store, the web app, the virtual machine, and the service management layer as well. You also have the ability to submit a PowerShell script to create a resource. This script is also going to be submitted to an Azure Resource Manager. And then you can also do it with Azure CLI. So PowerShell is basically a command prompt utility that is used for automating services on a Windows machine. And Azure CLI is basically a PowerShell or a Bash shell that is available in the cloud for doing the same thing as well. And then you can also submit requests through a REST client. So there's a number of APIs that is exposed, and this APIs allows you to be able to submit requests from any custom-built application for creating resources in the cloud. Just to show you an example, if you want to access the Azure CLI, so if I'm here in the portal.azure.com, if you remember in our last session, I mentioned that we have something called a Cloud Shell, and then when you click on that Cloud Shell, it would automatically open what looks like a PowerShell environment. And in this PowerShell environment, you can run any script that would execute in the cloud right here. So you can basically create virtual machines from here. You can create resource groups. You can create management groups. You can create container, or from within the PowerShell environment in the cloud. So that is usually called the Cloud Shell. However, you also have a PowerShell that is available locally on your machine. The PowerShell can be used to be able to script operations that you perform in the cloud. And here you can do things like get service, and that would show you a list of all the services. You can get process, and it would show you all the processes that are running on your machine. You can get services, and then you can pipe the PowerShell. I mean, I don't want to get into PowerShell now, just showing you some of the things that you can do. So in the Cloud Shell, which is very similar to the PowerShell that I've just shown you, except that it runs in the cloud, I can basically run commands like get AZ resource group, and if I press the enter key, this will show you all of the resources that are running in the cloud. I can also say get Azure resource group, and then if I press the enter key, you can see it shows you how many resource groups exist in Azure as well. So this is one resource group, this is another resource group, and then this is a default resource group that was created, and that's the AZ900 resource group that we created as well. So later on, in fact, I'm going to be showing you guys how to delete everything that you create in Azure that are sitting in a particular resource group. I mean, it's actually very important because your subscription only has $50 in it. You want to make sure that whenever you create any item in the Azure portal, you delete them immediately. Otherwise, you're going to run out of money before the expiry date. The command that you need to know how to, so if you say, for example, get Azure resource group, and then you specify the name of the resource group. I think the one resource group that we created is AZ900 resource group, and you press the enter key, you can see that resource group is automatically displayed for you. So I'm running this PowerShell in the cloud, so I'm able to query items within the cloud environment as well. If I want to delete this resource group, I can say remove, so you can change the get to remove. I'll probably have a different sessions where I would do some PowerShell crash course for you guys, just so that you know how to use PowerShell as well. So if you say remove AZ resource group, and then you specify a name parameters for this resource group, you can then specify the name of the Azure resource group. So it's AZ900 resource group, and then if you press the enter key, I will Okay, I am back. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, apologies for that. My network goes up and down sometimes. All right, so I was just giving you a quick rundown of how to delete your resources in the cloud. In fact, I will be showing you guys how to do that as well. So not a problem, you get an opportunity to be able to see that again. So let's talk about Azure subscription. So if you want access to any services in Azure, or if you want to be able to create any resource in Microsoft Azure, the first thing you need is an Azure subscription. Without an Azure subscription, you will not have the permissions or the ability to be able to create any resources in the cloud. The Azure subscriptions provide a way to authenticate users and also to authorize users to Azure accounts as well. So the Azure passes that we sent you guys for activating your Azure access, it's an example of an Azure subscription. You can have different types of Azure subscriptions. You can have a pay-as-you-go Azure subscription where you pretty much just subscribe and then you pay, you get billed later for all the resources that you consume in the cloud. Other Azure subscriptions that you can find is an MSDN subscription or a Visual Studio subscription. Some large enterprises would have an Azure subscriptions that is delivered through like an enterprise agreement. and it would have a preloaded amount in it as well. So it is important that you know that if you need to access certain resources in the cloud, you need a subscription. A subscription represents a billing boundaries. So every single report around how much money you have used up in the cloud is generated around that subscription as well. So it generates separate billing report and invoices for each subscription as well. So for example, if you have a pay-as-you-go subscription, that pay-as-you-go subscription at the end of every single month, you are going to get a report, and that report would show you the cost that you have consumed, and it will be accompanied by an invoice, and that invoice would have to be paid for as long as you want that subscriptions to be active. It also represents an access control boundaries, so meaning you can control which user has got access to which subscription. So obviously, if I give you permission on a production subscription, it means you can access resources that are created in the production environment. And if I give you access to a subscription that is for training, you'll be able to access resources for training as well. So you can manage and control access to resources that users can provision with specific subscriptions as well. So if you don't have permissions to a subscription, or if you haven't been given access to a particular subscription, you will not be able to utilize or create resources within that subscription. If you take a look at an image on the right, you can see that we have some sort of hierarchy going on there. The first thing at the top is an Azure account, which is your username or your email address that you use on the Microsoft Azure. The next thing that you see there is what is called an Azure Management Group. We're going to talk about that just now, and I'll show you how to create one and how to put subscriptions under your management group. And then you can see then from there you have multiple different types of subscriptions that are basically organized underneath each and every single one of this management group. So you have a development subscriptions, you have a test subscriptions, you have a production subscriptions. So many enterprises would also have a subscription that looks very similar to this, or it could be different. They could have the subscriptions for development. So every single development activities will happen in the subscription. They could have a development for UAT. So when the application is ready for user testing, it will be moved to this particular subscription. And you could have a production subscriptions, which is where all live applications will basically run from. So if I give person A permissions to a particular subscription, they will be able to have access to resources within that subscription. So let's look at a walkthrough, and in this walkthrough, I'm just going to show you generally all the Azure environment. I mean, many of you have seen this before, but let's just have a look. When you have a subscription and you sign into Azure, this is what your Azure subscription will look like. It will start out with Azure services for quick creations. It will start out with recent activities that you have performed, and then you will have a bunch of navigations that you can do here also. This is just a snippet of services that you have consumed recently. If you want to see all of the other services, you can go to more services as well. I spoke earlier about a management group. So if you go to Azure Management Group, you can see there that you can create a management group. I'll be showing you guys how to use management group to sort of organize your subscription. And if you also type here, just in case you don't see that subscription in the same place that mine is, you can also see that you have a subscription here. So you can view requests to the subscriptions. So you can also give feedback based on that subscriptions. You can manage policies for this subscription. So allow everyone in the subscription entering Active Directory account. So pretty much policies that are created here basically represents things that would apply to this particular subscription as well. You also have the ability to pin the subscriptions to the dashboard. In our case, that would not be necessary right now. And then you can see some of the subscription details. So because this subscription was only activated this morning, there is no current cost consumed in this subscription. And we also have things like Secure Store, Score. We have a parent management group, which we're also going to talk about as well. And also from the subscription, you have the ability to be able to add a new subscription if you want to add another subscription. So maybe you have purchased an additional subscription and you would like to add it. These are some of the offers and subscription types that are available. The free trial we have spoken about, this is the one that requires a credit card just for identity purposes. The pay as you go, obviously this you get billed, you use it first and you get billed after. And this is Azure for Students. So I think we are going to be getting every single one of you Azure for Students because it's a lot less in terms of cost, and it provides you for up to 12 months free product access as well. Okay, so you've seen how the Azure portal works. You've seen how you can use it. Let's quickly talk about what Management Group is. So because Microsoft Azure portal contains thousands and thousands of resources, and in most enterprise environment, you are going to be setting up more than one resources, and you're going to have more than one administrator. It is absolutely Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Okay. All right, cool. Sorry, my network was also going up and down. Could you give me like a minute? Just 10 seconds. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Apologies. So, so one of the first activities that you would need to perform when you are organizing your Azure environment is using what is called a management group. I'm going to go ahead and just create a bunch of management group, and I will show you how it's done. So if you come in to the Azure portal, and then you type here management group, you would see that management group is actually maintained as a resource as well. What I would like to do is in this management group, by default, you can see that we have a root, a tenant root group, which is automatically created for you. And in that root group, there's a subscription that is automatically added. So this means that even if you don't create a management group at all, one will be automatically created for you and your subscriptions will be added to it. But this doesn't seem all effective, especially if you are going to be managing your environment and structuring it in a more best practice manner. So to do this, most organizations would have a dedicated team of people that are responsible for training. So I'm going to create a management group training. So I would call it trainee MG, and then I would also give it a display name. And then when I hit the submit button, it takes a second or two, and then you would have the management group. I'm going to create another management group, and I'm going to call this test MG. So I'm going to say test management group. I'll also create one last one, and I'll call it dev, or let's make this production MG. So this will be production management group. And then if I hit the submit button, you can see that the training management group has been created. So if you give it a second or two more, all the other management groups that I created would also show up here. And then what you want to do is that you can see that your Azure Pass sponsorship subscription is still added to the tenant root group. You might want to just put that in the training group because that's where it belongs. So you would click on the training group and then you would choose the add subscription. And then here you can see that in our case we only have one subscription. So if I click on the save button, it would automatically update this. And now if you go to the management group level, you can see that so if you just refresh a little bit, you can see that the subscription is no longer at the tenant root group. So the tenant root group has now become the parent for both the production, the test management, and the training group. And then if you look on your right-hand side, you can also see that the total subscriptions for all these other groups remain zero except for the training management group as well. So if I click on the training management groups, you can see that the subscription has now been moved in there. You can relocate the subscription if you want to. If you click here and you say add a subscription, if I click on save on the test management group, the subscriptions would automatically be moved from the training subscription and it would be moved to the test management group subscription as well. So this is an activity that you would probably perform whenever you realize that you no longer require a subscriptions to be in a particular management group. You can relocate it very simply by going into the management groups and just moving it in there as well. Okay, to conclude this demonstration, I'm going to move the subscription back into the training management group and click on the OK button. Okay, I might need to give it a little bit of time to sort of just refresh things as well. All right, so that is it for management group. Any questions on management group? All right, if there are no questions for management group, I'm going to continue. So everything that we've looked at so far has been theoretical. I mean, we looked at Azure Region, right? And we said that Azure Region is a physical building where Microsoft Data Center is located. And we said that Microsoft also creates something called region pairs. Region pair is basically two data centers that are in the same regions, but they are 300 miles apart. And we also looked at something called availability zones. And availability zone pretty much represent one or more data center in the same region. So in the case of a Johannesburg region, there will be 3 physical data centers that have independent power, independent storage, independent cooling, and independent infrastructure as well. And between these 3 different data centers, there will be a high-speed, low-latency communications between them as well, so that when you store your data in one data center, it will be replicated to the other data center as well. This is specifically designed this way to provide redundancy to ensure that your resources or your managed services are up all the time. We also spoke about some of the ways in which you can organize your work in the cloud. One is by using a management group. Other is by using the subscriptions. We said a subscription is a billing boundary. This is where all your invoicing and your report around consumptions of managed services is basically going to be. And we also spoke about the fact that you can use resource group to be able to organize your resources into resource container or into a logical grouping. I particularly like organizing my work into resource group because then when I'm done, I can just delete the resource group and everything in that particular resources will be deleted as well. So in the next session, we're going to be looking specifically at the core Azure workload. So we have quite a few things that we're going to look at throughout this session. First is we're going to look at a virtual machine. We're going to look at an Azure App Service. We're going to look at an Azure Container, Azure Kubernetes. This is an example of another Azure Container, Azure Virtual Desktop. So these are all the different workloads. We might not be able to show the demonstrations for everything. You have virtual network, you have VPN gateway, you have virtual network pairing, you have Express Route, we have Container, we have file storage, we have Cosmos DB. I mean, these are different types of databases that you can have, and we also have an Azure Marketplace. So in the compute service, so we will be looking at all the services that you see on the screen. So an Azure Compute is an on-demand compute service that provides compute resources such as disk, processor, memory, networking, and operating systems. You can think of it as a physical computer that you buy and then you use for running your application, except that this is a virtual software emulated computer that is running in Azure. An example of an Azure Compute is virtual machine, app services, container, Kubernetes, and then virtual desktop as well. Let's look at these individually. So what is a virtual machine? Well, a virtual machine is a software emulation of a physical computer. If you ever thought about what a computer is, most people think of a computer as this window that we're looking at here. It's got a start button, and then you can click things, you can install applications on it, and you will be right. You can also create another window inside another window. I mean, if you remember on Monday, when we did the first session, I created a virtual machine and I logged into the virtual machine and I had two different desktops. So this emulation is based on, or it includes virtual processor, it includes memory, it includes storage, and it includes networking. I mean, processor, memory, and storage are really what makes up a physical computer anyway. The only difference here is that all these components are virtualized. They are based on your physical processor, they're based on your physical memory, and they're based on your physical storage as well. Obviously, for this virtual network or this software emulated physical machine to be able to communicate, it also needs access to some sort of networking. So there's network component that is available, and then infrastructure. This is part of the infrastructure as a service offering that provide total control and customization. And if you remember in our last lecture, we spoke about the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and also software as a service as well. Let me show you guys a quick walkthrough. So in this walkthrough, I'm going to create a virtual network, and I'm going to create two virtual machines in the virtual network, and I'm going to log into this two virtual machine, and I'm going to try and communicate between two virtual machine network as well. Oh, okay, I think this, okay, let's follow this walkthrough. Create a virtual machine, connect to the virtual machine, and install a web server role. All right, great. So I'm going to go to Azure, and then if you have not created a virtual machine before, just search for it at the top there. So I'm going to create a virtual machine. Currently, we have no virtual machine. So to create a virtual machine, right here at the top, I'll click Create, and I'll say Azure Virtual Machine. When the Azure Virtual Machine loads, I specify my subscription. And in the resource group, now this is absolutely important because at the end of our session today, I'm going to show you guys how to delete the resource group, thereby deleting everything inside the resource group. So I'm going to choose that resource group that I created, AZ900 resource group. I'm going to call this my VM. And just for this to be unique, I'm going to put my initials at the end of it, which is GO. So when you create your virtual machine, do the exact same thing as well. I'm going to put this in the East US, and this will be seen as the availability option here is no infrastructural redundancy. So on the slide, I told you that if you don't have any availability option applied, this would just be a single standalone virtual machine and it has no redundancy. However, there's the natural redundancy that is provided by Azure, which is the 99.99 uptime. So if you go on the website Uptime, I think it's uptime.com, yes, you can actually see what this percentage represents. And then you can type a particular uptime. It's actually not this one. Okay, the website has changed a little bit. I think it used to be free, but now it looks like they're charging. And then you can type a percentage number, and then what they will do is they will tell you Uptime app, I think is this. Let's have a look. Haven't used it in a while, but yeah. Okay, let's not waste too much time on that. So I'm just going to choose no redundancy here. And then the security type in this case is standard. There are other security options. I'm creating a Windows Server data center, so it's more like a desktop machine. But this is for servers, for running applications. We're going to be hosting a website on that particular application in just a moment. And then here, I'm going to choose 2 virtual CPU and 8 gigs of RAM for this machine. And as you can see, this is going to cost me 2 Rand, 11 cents per month, or 2,000 Rand per month for just that virtual machine. And also be aware the reason why this is also quite expensive is because I'm sitting in East US. Okay, I need to create an account that I'm going to use to access this virtual machine. I'm going to call it my VM admin, and I'm going to give it some sort of password. And then, obviously, because I'm going to be setting up this machine for remote access through virtual remote desktop, I would like to allow an inbound port for 389, and I would like to allow an inbound port for HTTP as well, because I'm going to be setting up a web server on that machine, and that web server, I will need to access it from outside of the virtual machine. So I'm going to choose 2 different ports. The first one is RDP, and the other one is the HTTP as well. I'm not going to do anything on the storage, and then also here I'm not going to do anything on the network, but you can see that a virtual network is automatically created for you. I'm also going to disable monitoring on this virtual machine. It's just a test virtual machine. We're going to delete it shortly. And then finally, I'm going to go to review and create. Okay, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it on the group. I'll be able to assist you. All right, so the validation is complete. It shows you how much the virtual machine will cost you. It also tells you that this virtual machine is open for remote desktop and for internet access. And then I'm going to click on the create button. So while this virtual machine is being deployed, I mentioned earlier Azure management, Azure's resource manager. So this deployment tool that you're looking at right now is an Azure resource manager. This particular resource manager is sort of going ahead and running all of the scripts that is required to sort of create this virtual machine. And obviously once the virtual machine is created, it would automatically give us the report as well. So every single time you submit a request, that request is submitted to an Azure Resource Manager, ARM, and then that Azure Resource Manager will then go ahead and execute those resources based on that as well. There are occasions where you would also want to be able to deploy one or more templates that already exist on the internet. So you can go online, and let me just go to Google and search for Azure ARM templates. And there's a lot of templates. They call them quick start templates. So if I actually just go to Azure ARM quick start templates. Yeah, and then if you go on the quick start template here, this is basically one of the advanced stuff around ARM. So let me say, for example, I'm looking for template for SharePoint. I mean, for some of you who have had to set up SharePoint from scratch before, you know how much work is required to sort of do that. But if you have to do this again, try not to have to do it, from scratch. You can actually just use a quick start template to be able to do that. So I'm looking currently at an ARM template that would deploy SharePoint for me, and it would deploy pretty much everything that you see on the screen. And then if you want to know more about the quick start template and how many virtual machines are involved, you can do that by coming in here as well. And here you can see the script that is actually executed is here. This is the whole script that is executed for creating SharePoint and installing SharePoint. I mean, look at how cool this is. And then if you go back to the quick start template, let me just go back, and you want to deploy this quick start template, you don't even have to copy and paste it. All you need to do is just say deploy to Azure, and then sign it into your Microsoft Azure environment, and then you can go grab coffee. And by the time you come back, it would have created a virtual machine, one or more virtual machines for you. It would have set up the SharePoint on top of that virtual machine. And in fact, some of these virtual machines will also have what is called images as well. So if I say multi-server, so this is an ARM template for MongoDB. So if you click on it, you'll be able to see this is just going to set up MongoDB for you in the cloud. So pretty much anything you can imagine, you can set it up with this AR template as well. And it would give you a summary of what is created and how it is created as well. So it's really, really important that you know. I'll probably do another session on looking at some of the quick start template that is available for allowing you to deploy information within the cloud. Okay, our virtual machine is created. What I am going to do is I'm going to go into the virtual machine, and the way that I do that is by downloading the RDP file, and then I'm going to log in my VM admin. And I'm going to click yes to accept the certificate for encrypting the RDP session. And in a matter of time, you can see that I am now signed in automatically signed in to Microsoft Azure. I actually left a script here earlier that I wanted to show you guys, but I would also show you how to get it. So what I want to do is I actually want to make this virtual machine a web server. So now if you take a look, I have my own start button, and if you go in the virtual machine, there's also another start button there as well. So this is what a virtual machine really is. I'm sitting inside a machine, and this machine is sitting in the US. If I want to make this machine a web server, I can do that by, let's look at the quickest way to do this, by using PowerShell. So on this virtual machine, I will run PowerShell in an elevated privilege. And also let me increase the font size for this PowerShell so you can see what I'm going to be doing. And if I click on the create, in the PowerShell command, I can install what is called Windows features. So this is how you install Windows features, Windows feature, not features. So I hit the tab button, and the tab button would automatically detect the command and complete it for you. And the Windows feature I want to install is going to be called Web Server. So I'm going to call that Web Server. You can hit the tab button as well. It would automatically find it for you. And then here, I also want to include management tools. And I don't even have to type the management tool completely. So if I hit the tab button, it would also auto-complete it for me as well. Just make sure you get a couple of the first few characters right, and it would automatically include it. So if you're wondering where I'm getting all of this walkthrough from, everything that I'm showing you guys, it's actually coming from your GitHub environment. So if you go to AZ900, and then you choose that one, you guys are going to be doing all the labs that are here. Actually, the one that I'm trying to show you now is setting up a virtual machine. And you can see the step-by-step instructions that you will need to follow, and logging, and basically create. And this is that script that I'm running, which is web server, include management tools. And then let me just paste this here. If I press the enter key, so what this is actually doing is this is installing, it's turning this particular server into a web server, which means if you want to host a website and you've been thinking about where to host it, you can use the infrastructure as a service platform that is available in the cloud. Later on, I'm also going to show you guys how to create another website, but not use the infrastructure as a service. I'm going to use the platform as a service. So infrastructure as a service, remember, you're responsible for the virtual machine, you're responsible for the operating system, you're responsible for configuring all of the different requirements to be able to host a website. Hence, they say that the infrastructure as a service provides you with the most flexibility. All right, so this installation is almost done. Once the installation is completed, you would see that I would immediately get, so currently if I go to Tools on the Server Manager, that installation that I just did now is what installed the Internet Information Server. Internet Information Server is a Windows tools, and that Windows tools is used for hosting website. And then if you take a look, these are all the different Windows features that are available currently on a Windows Server machine. So the one with an X simply shows that it has been installed. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering how I got this, I just said get Windows features, Windows feature. If you hit the tab button, you can see that it will show you all the different Windows features that exist. So I have just installed the Windows Server IIS. So let's see if you would see an X marked on it. So if I go up a little bit, it's going to be part of the Windows Server platform. So let's see, so enhanced storage, BitLocker, .NET Framework. It's actually part of the .NET Framework web platform, and if it doesn't have that X next to it, it really just means that, there we go, so that's the web server. You can see that I have just installed the web server IIS, and that is really what installed this as well. Now that the installation is done, I can actually close my web server. In fact, I can go to the web server itself and see this website that is currently hosted there. So in the Server Manager, I go to Tools, and then in Tools, I come in here, you can see there, I go to IIS Manager, and in the IIS Manager, you can see that a sample website has been hosted for me. So if I were to go to that sample website, and I go to Manage Website, and I say Browse, it's going to open up the browser, and it's going to open up the website for me automatically. Okay, and there we go. You can see here is a sample website hosted on the local host. It's just a single page website with Internet Information Server, and surprisingly, what has just happened now can be also accessed from anywhere in the world. In fact, if I've just minimized my virtual machine, I'm no longer inside my virtual machine. If I come back to my Azure environment and I go to my virtual machine and I click on the overview, so in the overview section of the virtual machine, if you can see there's a public IP address here. If any of you were to take any of this public IP address from your machine and paste it in your browser, you would actually be able to see that website that I've just created. So just for test, I'm just going to put that here in the chat for some of you who want to try it. I think that's right. Oh, sorry, that's not the right one. So let's get the IP address. and then, okay, it doesn't want to copy it. So it's 20, 124, 234, 15. All right. If you give that a shot, actually, so that you can click it directly, .124.234.15, and it becomes a link. If you click on it from your side there, you will see that there's no trick whatsoever. This particular website that I've just hosted, it's actually publicly available to the world. And obviously, if you want to make it public, you would essentially apply some sort of domain name to it. So if you associate that URL to some sort of domain name, you will then be able to access that particular virtual machine through that domain name. All right, so we have successfully created a virtual machine. We have successfully installed web server on that virtual machine, and that virtual machine, as it stands right now, is currently running our website. We obviously don't have the time. If we did, I would show you how to create like a sample website of your own and deploy it on that server, and then you would see that server just being available as well. Yeah, thank you, Rodney. Were you able to see the site? Oh yeah, you said it works. So yeah, so okay, that's our first walkthrough for the day. So let's move on. Let's keep going. Any questions? Okay, so if there are no questions, let's switch gears a little bit. So yesterday we spoke about different Azure model available in the cloud. We spoke specifically about 3 different Azure models. So the first is basically an infrastructure as a service. An example is a virtual machine that you get to create and maintain yourself. I just showed you a demo, and in that demo you've seen how to create a virtual machine and how to host a website in that virtual machine. The second type of Azure model that we spoke about was the platform as a service. In a platform as a service, I want to host a website, but either I don't have the technical skills to create virtual machine and create the website, and I just want to create my website without having to worry about all of that. Well, if you want to do that, you use the app service. So app service is a fully managed platform to build, deploy, and scale web apps and APIs very quickly. It works with pretty much all kinds of website hosting services you can imagine out there. So .NET Framework, .NET Core, Node.js, Java, Python, PHP, it's all available. It's a platform as a service offering with enterprise-grade performance, security, and compliance requirement. Let's quickly take a look at how to create a website by using the app services. So to create an app service, I'm going to go back to Azure, and in the search box, I'm going to just type app service. And then when you click on the app service, it brings you here and it tells you here that you can create applications that runs in the website, in the web. You can create mobile application as part of the app service. You can create APIs, and it supports all of these standard APIs. So your .NET Framework, your Java, your Node.js. So the next time you're thinking of building a PHP application locally and you want to host it in the cloud, this is a very simple process of how to create it. So if you come in here and you create on the app service, it's going to come up and say, okay, cool, let's walk you through the process. The first thing you need to choose is a subscription. We have our Azure Pass. I am following the same trend. I am literally going to create this particular web app inside our same resource group. So what do you want to call this website? Well, maybe your company name is ABC Corporation. So that DNS, so when you are done creating this, the fully qualified name of your website or your website address will be ABC Corporation corporation.azurewebsites.com, because what is happening is that whatever name that you choose here will be appended to this particular surface. So it'll be an azurewebsite.net, but obviously if you want to, you can buy your own domain and you can apply your own domain, so it'll just be a normal domain website. In my case, I'm not going to use code. I'm just going to use a Docker container, That is something that is a bit beyond the scope of this class, but we will explain it. I will explain it on the slide. And then I also want to put this in East US. So I'm going to choose East US because that's where our original service is. This will be a Linux plan, and you can see it's got 210 total ACU, it's got 3.5 gig memory, and then I don't want to do zone redundancy right now. I want to create a single container, so you can compose, and I'm going to be using an image from you can have image from Azure Container Registry. So Docker is something that we're going to talk about shortly. And then I'm using Nginx, and the image tag is essentially going to be that. So if you are trying this out, I think on your machine, you're not going to have that image tag available to you, but that's an image tag for a very simple Hello World website. So I'm going to click on the next button. And then under networking, it's going to ask to put this in some sort of network. We don't really have to do any configuration here. I'm just going to click next. Same on the monitoring and on the tags as well, because I just want to show you how quickly you can create a website without having to deal with the whole process of managing the virtual machine as a whole. Any questions? Okay, network injections. Well, right now I don't really need that, so I'm just going to click next to monitoring. And then also enable application insights. Well, I don't need that also. This is something that I'm going to delete just now. I also don't want to apply a tag. And then if you get here, you can see that we've just created a web app. It's a premium V2 SKU, and the estimated price is going to be 1,000 plus Rand per month. And then if I click the create button, and if you remember, in the infrastructure as a service virtual machine hosting a web server, I needed to enable the HTTP endpoint so that you can access it from outside as an inbound endpoint. I needed to install the web server in it, and I needed to then be able to copy that IP address and then paste the IP address in your browser to be able to access it. So our Azure, our ARM template is being deployed. When this is done, we can then go back to that particular resource, and then we all right, I'm back. Sorry guys, when the network drops, I also know because it just tells me straight away. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, cool. Thank you very much. So now I have the web server has been deployed successfully. I can go to the resource, and then in the resource, this is the URL that I'm looking for. So you can see that URL there. It says abccorporation.azurewebsite.net. If you copy that URL and then you come to your browser and you paste it and you press the enter key, guess what? That website is hosted. And this is a website that you can also access from your site as well. So in less than 2 minutes, you have a website up and running. I'm also going to paste it here. Okay, cool. I see Rodney said that I was a little bit fast on the creation. Okay, I can sort of walk you guys through this again. So the app services allows you to create 4 different types of component, right? The first component is a website, and that's the one that we're going to be doing. So if I go to app service and I create a new app service, I choose my Azure Pass, I put it in a resource group, and then I give my website a name. Whatever name you give your website will be appended to the surface, to azurewebsite.net. So if I give this name my websites.go. The fully URL from my website will be my website go.azurewebsite.net. Pay particular attention to that mark there. If you use something that is very popular that someone has done before, chances are it would not work so I've just put web there, so the web is not available. So if you also put site, I believe site is also not available. So you have to use something very unique as well. It's pretty much almost the same way you register your domain. I chose the Docker container because I would like to host this website in a Docker container, and I chose East US as well because that's where my resource group is. I will talk about Docker container shortly, but just bear with me for now. These are the planned. Okay, I'm back. So, and when you are subscribing to a website from like AfriHost or Web Africa, and then they're showing you all the different options, and each of the options cost a certain amount of money, well, that's the same thing here as well. So even though you are not provisioning this particular server in the back, there's still always a server needed. So in this case, there is a server that will be created for you, but you don't have to manage it yourself. So this is the SKU for that particular website. So in the zone redundancy, we're not going to choose anything. In the quick start, in the Docker container, we're using a single container, and then we are basically going to use a sample Nginx. And then remember to paste this image and image tag here. And like I said, when I get to the Docker section, I'll explain what this means. You go to the networking, and then we are also not going to be using any networking injections. You go to the monitoring, we are also not going to be using any application inside. And then you go to tag, and then you go to review, and if everything works out fine, you can then come here and click on that particular website as well. Okay, so I hope that helps. I'm not going to be creating it again because we've already done it. In fact, the website is live. You can also test it from your side as well. So Rodney, you can let me know if that is sufficient, and then we can move on to the next one.
Yep, that was sufficient.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you very much. So now let's quickly talk about, I think maybe we can take a short tea break here for 10 minutes. And then
we had a hand from
yes.
Baba. I don't know if he is answered or not.
No, for some reason I lost. I couldn't see your video screen for the past 8 minutes.
8 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, there's a chance, Bafana, that it's your network, because I don't think everyone else had the same experience. So because of that, just remember this whole session is recorded, so you can always go back to it later and have a look at it. It will be counterproductive to try and recover what we did in the last 8 minutes, okay?
That's fine.
All right, cool. Any other questions? All right, let's take a 10 minutes tea break. You can stretch your legs, grab some coffee, and then and I think at exactly 11 o'clock, let's come back and carry on. And we still have quite a few walkthrough to go through, and some more interesting things. So we're still going to be looking at the SQL server. We're still going to be looking at the container services, and so on. So yeah, so let's take a 15 minutes tea break. 11 o'clock we'll be back, and then we'll have one more hour to go. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. I think we have just under an hour to sort of complete, and there's still quite a few more things that I still plan on doing today. I see quite a few people dropped off as well. So in the future, I mean, guys, you don't really have to drop off and come back, because I know now we have to admit every time. And also, you guys should let me know this breaks. If it's really important, maybe next time we can skip it and we can just go all the way. For 3 hours, I know it can be quite difficult to listen for that long. So sometimes it's important to sort of take a break as well. Okay, so we have just gone through how to set up compute services in Microsoft Azure, and we have looked at a compute service in the infrastructure as a service. We've looked at how to set up a virtual machine and host a website on it. We have also looked at an example of a platform as a service, and we've done that by using the app services. We set up our websites, and we also test that the website is now available to the public. We exposed, we were able to access it using the URL. So both of this form of creating managed Azure services require some sort of virtual machine to be created. Either that you have to create them yourself in the infrastructure as a service, or it has to be created automatically for you in the platform as a service. However, the next generation of virtualization, it's essentially the concept of containerization. So the concept of containerization is basically very similar to a virtual machine. It's like a virtual environment, but without the virtual machine or without the operating systems. It's just an image that can run anywhere. It's mobile, it's very lightweight, and it doesn't require an operating system management, and it can respond to changes on demand. So meaning if you make changes to it, you don't have to shut it down and restart it. So you can think of a container as a very mobility-friendly, lightweight, virtualized environment, but without all the extra overhead of a virtual machine or an operating system or anything for that matter. You can create container in Azure by creating what is called an Azure Container Instance. It's also a PaaS offerings, so it runs a container in Azure without the need to manage virtual machine or additional services. There are other containerized services out there. There's a cloud-based container service called Azure Kubernetes. Basically, it's an orchestration service for container with distributed architecture and large volumes of containers. So you can pick and choose which one of the container images that you want, and you can use it to host your website. So just to reiterate, irrespective of if you're using the app services or if you're using the infrastructure as a service, there is still a virtual machine. Even though you don't physically create the virtual machine in the case of an app service, Microsoft will deploy a virtual machine for you. So if you remember, during the previous demonstration I was showing for the app services, there was a plan that included a Linux virtual machine. So meaning you could have chosen between a Linux machine or a Windows machine. In the case of a container services, no virtual machines are required. So this is the next generation virtualization concept. It doesn't require virtual machine. It's lightweight. It basically doesn't need an operating system, and you can make changes to it on demand. You don't have to shut it down and restart it for those changes to reflect. And like I said, this forms part of the platform as a service offering provided by Microsoft. And if you want to know more information about this, there is a book. Let me just admit, there's two people waiting in the library. So I would like, I'm not sure who, Clinton or Philip. I don't Philip here. Can someone please just monitor as well, so when people come in, they can be admitted?
Yeah, we are checking, Femi. It just doesn't pop up.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm getting the pop-up on my side, so I think it's because you guys are just guest logging. Okay, but I'll just keep an eye on it as well. Otherwise, people will just be sitting in the lobby. All right. So to really sort of find out more about container and Azure Container, there is a distribution. It's about 160 page. You can sort of. I'm just gonna. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we lost you. Said there's a distribution and then your network cut.
Oh, cool. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So I just shared the book in the chat for some of you with access to the chat. You can. It's about 160 pages. It talks a little bit more about the next generation virtualizations using containerization as well as Kubernetes. So containerization and virtualization from a Kubernetes point of view deserves a whole lecture of its own, or a whole class of its own, but I've just shared the book for some of you who have interest. You can sort of look through it. So what I want to do then now is to just show you how quickly it is that you can create a container, and the container would have some sort of image in it as well. So using Azure Portal, we're going to create a container, we're going to deploy it, and then we're going to test it and see how you can access it. To be able to do this, you can go to Container Instance, and then click on the container instances, and then I'm just going to create one container instance. And then here, I'm going to choose the same resource group. Remember, the reason I'm doing this is so that when I want to delete everything, I'm just going to delete that resource group, and it would remove everything in that resource group as well. Okay, so I'm going to give this my container, let's just call it my container, GO, and I'm putting GO at the end of it so that I have a unique name as well. And then I can use the quick start image, and that image will be this one here. You can see there are other images that you can choose. So this is just a simple hello world container. So it's going to run a hello world program, and it's going to show it to you. You can have a container running SQL Server. You can have a container running a specific application that you've built. So the idea here is that a virtual machine is not required. You can see the size of the container here is going to be dedicated on a 1 vCPU, 1.5 gig RAM. I want the container to be available publicly, so I'll choose the public network type, and then I'll give it a name as well. So I'll call it my container, GO. And then for as long as the DNS is unique, you'll be able to proceed. I'm going to allow access to this container through HTTP. Sometimes when you build an application and that application runs in a container and that application communicates with a different protocol, you would have to specify that protocol from here as well. So if it's a TCP protocol that is different or a UDP protocol that is different, you can sort of do that from that page. This is where you can configure some additional container properties, so things like a restart policy on failure. So if for whatever reason there's some sort of failure in the application running in the container, you might want to restart it, and that's what that would do. We're also not going to be using tags. And then when you click finish, so because I have a hello world program running inside this container, if I click the create button and this container creates successfully, if I go to that URL, it's just going to say hello world. So sometimes you might want to just have a container for running SQL Server. You might want to have a container for running MongoDB. And then when that container is up and running, your applications can connect to it and use it as a source of information for your application. this is, like I said, it's very lightweight, it's very mobile. You can move it from one environment to another very easily. And it's also a lot more cheaper than having to run either a virtual machine in the infrastructure as a service or a website in the app services as well. So these are, I'm not sure if you guys are, I just told there's not a lot of people. Okay, cool. Philip, are you there? I don't see Philip. Okay, so let's just carry on. So whilst we're waiting, I just keep checking to see if there's anyone coming back also into the lecture. Okay, sorry guys, I'm battling with network here, so it keeps bumping out. So I'm just going to refresh the page to see how far the deployment is. So technically guys, that's how you would create a container. Once the container, I'm going to actually come back to it and I'll show you guys what happened after it's been created as well. So we also have something called virtual desktop. Virtual desktop is it's a desktop and an app virtualization runs in the cloud. This is a very powerful feature that most enterprise organizations use to be able to provide access to virtual desktop in the cloud with specific applications in it. So let's say, for example, you have a machine or laptop, and that laptop is not strong enough to be able to run a particular application, either because the laptop doesn't have strong enough resources or enough space. Organizations can deliver desktop and app virtualization through the cloud by setting up a virtual app and a virtual desktop in the cloud that you can just connect to. It will open up on your machine like a normal remote desktop. The only difference is that you are not running anything locally on your machine except for the remote desktop app services as well. So you would find that most enterprise organizations will create hundreds and hundreds of thousands of virtualized app and desktop, and they would make it available in the cloud as well. So for most companies, this is really going to help a lot with security and also in managing devices across the entire organization, because nothing ever runs locally on the client machine, and also the client doesn't really need to have a really powerful machine to be able to connect to it. So you can create a full desktop virtualization environment without having to run additional gateway servers. You can publish unlimited host pools to accommodate diverse workloads. You can reduce cost with pool and multi-session resources as well, which will basically allow multiple users within the organizations to be able to access desktops or virtual desktops and virtual applications remotely without having to have them installed on their local machine. To give you an example, there is a specific version of Office that is for remote desktop. So it's a remote desktop license version. So you can set up Microsoft Office on a particular Windows operating systems, like a Windows 10 operating system, and then make it available as a virtual desktop in the cloud. So you don't have to buy licenses for pretty much, you still have to buy licenses for every single sessions, but the license is a lot more cheaper and it's easy to manage because you deploy it once in a virtual desktop environment, and everyone within your organizations connect to it, and they can use Office, they can use, if you have Office as a virtualized applications there as well. So it does reduce cost for the organization. Okay, so let's talk about virtual network. Now, this one is going to be an interesting one. So a virtual network, it's a logical control of resources that requires communications within internet with each other. So this can be used to communicate with remote users. It can be used to communicate on premises as well. And the ways in which you can connect and access your virtual network from outside the Microsoft Azure cloud is by using what is called a virtual private network, a VPN. So you can VPN into your virtual network, and then you can communicate with servers and services that is available in the virtual environment. So let's take an example of an organization that is running exclusively in the cloud, and they're running SharePoint, they're running Exchange, they're running pretty much all their productivity applications, but this application is running in a virtual machine. You can expose the applications through the web like we've done in our case when we set up the web applications, but sometimes you want to keep it as secure as possible. Especially if the application is not a publicly internet consumable application, then in that regard, you can just allow users to securely establish a virtual network. Okay, I'm back. You guys hear me? Okay, Bafana, you have a question?
Oh, I wanted to. An example. An example of an application. A common application can all identify with.
You wanted to know example of applications that can be virtualized.
Yes. Something that is familiar to everybody.
An example is Office, right? Obviously, the developer or the manufacturer of the applications have to have the app has to be virtualization ready in terms of app virtualization. So, but an example is obviously Microsoft Office. You install Microsoft Office on one machine and you virtualize it, and you can have 100 people use the same virtual machine instance and not have to pay local license on a particular, on an individual desktop machine as well. So maybe there's a particular application, and in that application, you need that applications to be virtualized in one way or the other, so that you can provide access to more than one people. You can do that by using the application virtualizations. So some of the benefits, obviously, of using application virtualization is reduced cost in terms of licensing. You still have to buy a bulk license for the virtualized app. So maybe you can buy like 100 sessions. So meaning you buy the application, for example, Office, and then you buy 100 sessions for virtual license. In fact, I'm not sure if you've done this before, but you can buy a virtual license for Office. So this will be a completely separate license, Microsoft Office. So it's crazy that thing doesn't do that just as much. Okay. Okay, so if you, so somewhere here you'll be able to buy like a virtualization Office, a virtualization license for Office. It'll be either, so it's a VDI license, so you can see that. So you can do a bit more research on it as well to see how the virtualization licenses work, where you can buy like a certain number of sessions to that particular server as well. And any application that is running basically have any application that is running will basically have access to those virtual machine as well. Okay, so finally our container is done. I've just gone to it now and check it. You can see right now I'm running a container, an Azure Container Instance. You can see that Azure Container Instance is showing me what is being hosted in that Azure Container Instance. So you can run pretty much anything here. It could be a process, it could be an application, it could be some kind of a web application as well. So this then would allow you to be able to save cost, because then you would not be incurring the cost of a heavy virtual machine. Let's carry on, guys. We're running out of time. Okay, so we were talking about virtual network. So let me show you guys how to create virtual network. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to quickly create, this would take a little bit of time. I'm going to create a virtual network first, and I'm going to create 2 virtual machines in that virtual network. So to create a virtual network, you would come into Azure and choose virtual network. So I'm going to click create. And I'm going to put the virtual network inside the same resource group. I'm going to call it ABC Corp network. All right. And it is important that you know that when you're creating a virtual network name, you cannot have a space in between them. So you must make sure that you can have a dash however if you want to, or you can have an underscore. So we're setting up an ABC Corp network, and this is going to be the headquarter. And the headquarter is going to be stored, is going to be in Azure exclusively. I'm going to leave it in East US. I'll click on the next button. So this is the address space that will be used in the cloud. So if I want to, I can change this to a different private IP address. This is just going to be a bunch of IP address that will be assigned to machines that are going to be used in there. I can disable pretty much all of this security stuff for now. This is not a live environment. And then I don't also want to have a tag. So when I get a past validations, then I can go ahead and create a virtual network. So once this virtual network is created, so so the virtual network had an IP address of 10.1.0.0/24. What this means is that the IP address will start, obviously the first IP address is going to be a default gateway IP address, so it will not be used. So not usable. The last IP address is also a broadcast IP address and also not usable. So if I create a virtual machine and I put the virtual machine inside this virtual network, the first virtual machine is going to have an IP address 2. The second virtual machine is going to have an IP address 3 as well. Let's quickly do that. Now that this VNet is created, I'm going to create a virtual 2 virtual machines inside. So to do that, I'll click on virtual network, virtual machine. I'll create a new virtual machine. And PM01. And always remember to put this inside the resource group, so that when you are done, you can delete it. And guys, I'm really emphasizing this because if you don't do that, if you don't delete your resources in the cloud, by the time you come back to it tomorrow, you would have run out of money. Azure Pass doesn't really have a lot. It's just $50 for the 15 days. So if you don't delete those resources, they're going to consume a lot of money. So I'm going to choose the standard virtual machine. I'm going to call it VM admin, and then give it a password. And remember, Azure password has to be strong. I'm also going to enable remote desktop onto the virtual machine. I'm going to leave the default disk configuration. And remember, I created an ABC Corp Network HQ. You must remember to put that machine inside that virtual network. So I've done that. And then I'll click next. I don't want any monitoring, so I'll click on disable there as well. And then I also don't want to install any extension on this machine. And then I'm going to click review. And then the validation then gets run. The validation is successful. Then I can go ahead and create a virtual machine. So let's create the second virtual machine. So remember, I've just moved away from there, but remember, if you want to see the progress, you can see that from here as well once it is submitted to the ARM engine. So I'm going to come in here, create another virtual machine, and I'm going to call this virtual machine VM2. I'm also going to leave it in East US, no redundancy. I'm choosing the Windows Server virtual machine. I'm using the same size. The username is vmadmin. I'm going to choose a password and also allow remote desktop so I can access it. Okay, the storage is fine. We're going to have one premium storage for the operating system. We're also going to put this virtual machine inside the same virtual network that we created earlier. So the HQ virtual network, and then I'm going to click next, disable monitoring, click next again, no extension, and no tag. Okay, and once the validation is successful, I'm going to click the create button. All right, and then you can see that. So if you go to a virtual machine, both the virtual machines are still being provisioned. It doesn't look like it actually started the first virtual machine. I see the second one is running. So maybe I moved away from that page too early. So let me just recreate it. VM01 is US standard virtual machine. Plan is also okay. Here, VM admin. Okay, remote desktop, storage, networking, monitoring, we're going to disable, no extension, no tag, and then let's review it. Okay, so validation is done. Click create. Okay, so now that virtual machine has started creation. So if I go to virtual machine now, you can see that, let me just go back here, go to virtual machine. You can see that I have the VM2 is created and is up and running. So let's connect to it through remote desktop while we're waiting for the other one. So I'm going to hit connect, RDP, and then click download RDP file. And remember, the username is vmadmin. Click yes. Okay, so I am now inside the second virtual machine. Let me go check up on, oh, the second virtual machine is also done. So let's connect to it as well. If I hit the download button, and then I click on the open file, click connect, the same username, vmadmin. And click yes. So you can see we have two virtual machines. So the first virtual machine is obviously this one. So I'm going to come here and then go to the command prompt. If I do an ipconfig, I think I'm in my physical virtual machine. There we go. So inside this virtual machine, if I go to the command prompt, and I do an ipconfig, you can see the IP address actually began from 4. Okay, so it seemed like there were other things that basically got 2, and 3, so it began from 4. Let me connect to the other virtual machine as well. So I think that's the one, that's the one that I connected to. This is the other virtual machine. So if I go to the command prompt for this virtual machine, and I do an IP config here, you will see that this one got an IP address of 5. So both the virtual machines are running, in the cloud, and they're running in the same virtual network. And from here, if I ping 10.1.0.4, I should be able to get a reply. If I don't, it'll be because that I have firewall. So remember, ping, if you have a firewall enabled, you will not be able to ping the virtual machines in there. So let me just come in here and turn off the firewall quickly, so you can see the firewall is, I can just turn it off by going here. Don't do this in a production environment. This is just for demonstration purposes. In the production environment, you would just add an exception. So let's go to the other virtual machine. And I'm also going to do the same, turn off the virtual firewall on this one. Click on the OK button. And now, if I check this, the IP address of this machine, so this machine has an IP of 5, so meaning if I bring 10.1.0.4, you can see that that is definitely giving a reply back. If I go to 4 and I ping 5 from 4, so if I go to ping.10.1.0.5 and I press the enter key, you can see now that both virtual machines are now available and they are ready to be used. So this is how you set up a logical environment for resources that needs to communicate in the cloud. If I want to, so say for example, you have a bunch of users and the bunch of users need to be able to connect to this particular virtual machine or to be able to remote into these virtual machines, you can set up what is called a VNet, which is a virtual network. And a virtual network would, you can set up a VPN, which is a virtual private network. It will allow users to be able to connect into that environment as if they are connecting into their remote office. In fact, the way you should look at what I've just done now is you can imagine that this is either a head office of a company or a branch office of a company, which is a virtual network. And also, in fact, I do have the ability to even turn one of these machines into a domain controller and then create a client machine and join that client machine to the domain controller. We don't really have the time to be able to go through those, so let's carry on. So far, any questions, Bafana? Go ahead.
No, I was saying I was covered. Thank you very much.
All right, cool. Thank you. All right, so we've got 2 more things to go to sort of finish off with this particular module. So the next thing we're going to talk about is we're going to sort of look at Azure storage. So what is an Azure storage? In fact, an Azure storage is like a regular storage, a cloud storage. Like, we used to have a lot of different types of cloud storage. You have a box. There was also another one that I forgot now that you can just subscribe to. You have OneDrive, okay? The difference between some of those Azure storage and some of those storages in this Azure storage is that this Azure storage is an enterprise-grade storage that is created for hosting things like virtual machines, and then you can also use it for file storage as well. So this is called there are 3 different services offered on the Microsoft Azure storage. One of them is called a container blob or a container storage. So whenever you hear the word blob, it means binary large object. It means that you can store anything varying from structured data to unstructured data to test. So things like video, audio, text, any kind of information that you just want to dump into a storage, you can use the container storage for it as well. A disk storage usually, this will be likened to the type of storage that you would have on a server, where you would host pretty much all your virtual machines into as well. And we also have Azure Files, which is like an SMB storage. This is the place where you want to store files that you would like to share with other people. It uses the SMB protocol, so you can map a drive from your local machine to the Azure File storage as well. There are different storage tiers. This is based on your needs and also based on how much budget you have. The hot storage is optimized for storing, and it's accessible frequently. So if you have a storage requirement for storing information and for accessing information quite frequently, maybe you have hundreds of people that needs to access a storage and store information there and retrieve that information on a regular, on a day-to-day basis, you would choose the hot access tier as well. If you want a cool access tier, this is optimized for storing. It's not accessed frequently. So if you are the type of person who would like to archive information and just keep it in the cloud, and you're still going to access it, but it's not an everyday thing. So you can access and store for at least 30 days. And then anything that is more than 108 optimized for storing data that's really accessed and is stored for at least 180 days with flexible latency requirement as well. So let's quickly take a look at how to create an Azure storage. Well, you don't necessarily create an Azure storage, you create what is called a storage account. So a storage account is it's how you create storage in the cloud. So if I say storage, you can see there I can create a storage account, and then I can come in here and I can create a new storage account. And when you're creating a storage account, like every other thing we've done, you need to specify a resource group where you want to put it. So I'm going to put it in our resource group, which is AZ900. I'm going to give my storage a name. So I'm going to call it my large store, my large data store. Let's just say my data store. Make it easy as well. Okay, someone is already taking that. So I'm going to say my storage 1 or my storage GO. Okay, so I've just added my initial at the end of it. I'm also going to put this in the East US. There are two types of storage performance. So here we have a general purpose storage. You have a premium storage. Okay, this is for low latency. I'm just going to choose the first option. And right, so this is a very, very important concept. So we call it the storage redundancy. Basically what this means is, where is your data stored in? We have several options for this, and these options are basically grouped around the different types of redundancy storage. So we have a local redundant storage. This is very low cost. It has basic protection against server rack and drive failure, and is recommended for non-critical applications. So what does that mean? So inside a data center, like a building, you have a rack. Inside that rack, you have a bunch of servers in there. If you create a locally redundant storage, that storage is sitting inside a particular rack. Okay? So meaning it doesn't really provide much protection. If your storage is sitting in that rack, in the locally redundant storage, it will replicate to another rack inside that particular data center. So it provides protection against rack failure. So if that rack goes down, there will still be another rack that would be able to continue to provide that storage access for you. So you can, which is a building that has a room, and in that room you have like 4 or 5 different racks in it. A locally redundant storage will store your information in at least 3 different racks inside that particular room. So even if you lose a power source, or if you lose a disk inside a particular rack, there's still 2 additional racks that will provide continued access to your storage. We also have what is called a geo-redundant storage option. It's an intermediate option with failover capability in the secondary region. So what this means is that if you create a storage account and you chose the redundancy of geo-redundant storage, a copy of your data will be stored in a secondary region as well. Okay, so and then you have a zone redundant storage. This is for protection against the data center level failure. It's recommended for high availability. It will literally just store your data in a particular zone and replicate it to other zone. And then you also have a combination of both, which is geo-zone redundant storage as well. You have to be aware. For additional information, I'll share some resources on how this works. I'm going to choose this locally redundant. You want to be able to do a secure transfer through the storage using REST API. So if you have like a special application that you've built and you want that application to be able to call this storage account and store information in it, you can enable that. Do you want to enable public access? Do you want to enable a storage account key access? So if anyone who's got access to this key will be able to use that storage account as well. So I'm just going to leave those three options, and then I'll come down here as well. So this is blob storage. If I want a blob storage, I can select that option. Do I want to enable network file systems? Do I want to allow cross-tenant applications for this storage? And you can also see the access tier. Is it a hot storage or a cool storage? So if this is a storage that will be used on a daily basis by multiple users and multiple applications, I will essentially choose the hot storage.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Gideon, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so I'm just going to choose next. And like I said, there's a lot of options that is available for this storage. I can also enable public access from all networks. So if I want people to be able to access this from public network from outside, I can enable that. I can also disable this and only allow access from a private access. So this will be from within the Azure environment. I can also specify, if I want to use Microsoft network routing or internet routing, I can click on the next button. There's a lot of options for protections. I can click next. I want to enable encryption key and I want to do encryption. I can actually go back and then I can disable encryption as well. So you can see all of the different options available here. So here I'm going to choose a Microsoft generated key. I can also choose my own key if I want to bring my key. I want to be able to store blobs and files only, or I can store all service types, so things like tables and queues. For some of you who are going to be attending the developer courses, we're going to be looking at what a table is and what a queue is. And then I can click on the next button, and then when you're done, you let the validation process run. Once the validation is done, you click on the OK button, and then right away the storage will start getting created. There's one thing you can download. It's called Azure Storage Explorer. It's a tool that you can install locally on your machine. It allows you to be able to access Azure storage. It's actually quite a powerful tool. It's available for Windows. So if you download it and you install it, you would immediately be able to connect your Azure storage to this application, and you can use it like a file server. So for some of you who've used OneDrive, Dropbox, or any of this storage tool before, that you had to download some sort of software, and that software allows you to be able to sort of use the storage environment, this will be something very similar as well. See, lots of people are jumping in and out. It's probably due to network problems whatsoever. Okay, cool. So you should install a storage explorer to be able to manage your storage. So if I come in here, you can see my storage is created and is done. And when you click on it, you would immediately see several options available in the navigation. So the first option here is going to be that I want to show is going to be the data storage. So you can see we have all the different types of blob storage. You have container, and then when you click on container, you can come in here and create what seems like a folder. So I can say financial files. And by the way, storage account can only contain lowercase files. Okay, and then you can decide if you want this to be publicly available as well. Is this a blob and it requires, and you want to use anonymous access? So I would probably use something like a blob if I'm building a mobile application or a website and I want to be able to store images and retrieve that image from this store without providing any authentication whatsoever. So if you say private access, you would need a key. And then if you sort of go to the advanced, you can see that you can enable encryption level at this time. You can click on create and it would automatically create that folder for you. So if you click on the folder, you can upload any file that you want into this location. So I can choose a file on my machine. I can go to download, choose the distributed application systems PDF, and you can see that that would automatically get uploaded into that particular storage location as well. I can go back to my storage, and in my storage I can go to file share. This is basically a file share, it's an SMB access. If I come in here, I can create a new file share, so I can call it global share, right? And then this is optimized for transactions, meaning there's going to be a lot of read and write happening on that particular file share. And then once you create this, this becomes a file share that can be mapped to a local machine. So when you click on the file share, you can see details about the file share. In fact, if you go to the overview, you would see you can connect to this file share from a Windows machine and choose a drive letter. And this is really, really cool. You can use a key, or you can basically use an Active Directory login. And then here, secure transfer is enabled SMB client connecting issues, support SMB3. Okay, cool. So you can literally decide that you want to connect to this particular file share from your local machine as well. And what this would do is you would have a normal share, like the normal Windows share that we always have, that we create by going here, like a Z drive mapped to Azure environment. And then you would be able to sort of use that to be able to manage that particular file share as well. There are a few things that I still need to do for you to be able to access it, like using the keys. So if you want to get if you go to the storage account, so it's called My Storage Go, and then you come in here, you can see on the security side, you can click on the access key, and then from the access key here, you can click show. There's usually two keys available. So one is for connection strings to the key, and then the other one is just a backup key as well. Just in case you forget this key, or you lost this key, or you delete that key, you can basically use the other one to be able to access it as well. You can also apply various data management strategies like data protection, DLP. You can do object replications. So all of these, in the Azure administration course, we talk more in depth about it as well. But the key here is for you to see the possibility in terms of how you can basically use the Microsoft Azure as well, storage account. So let me install the Storage Explorer and sort of just connect to it from here, and then you can see what this will look like. So I'm just going to accept Storage Explorer, click next, and it takes literally less than 2 minutes. I'm going to close that as well. And then once your Azure Storage Explorer is installed, obviously you would need to have a key to be able to connect to it. So you will not just, unless you have an anonymous access created on that particular storage, you would need to provide that key to be able to access it as well. Okay. right, I'm back. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Cool. All right, thank you, Shafiq. So I can launch this Storage Explorer. So remember, Storage Explorer, an Azure Storage Explorer is a local desktop application that you install on your machine, and it allows you to access pretty much everything that is in your storage account. So you will need to either provide your Azure subscription logging account, or you can just provide a key as well. So if you provide a key, you'll be able to see any single container that is installed. And containers are like folders, so you can see there. So it's connecting to a local environment. So you can either say that, oh, I have a key, or I have a storage account. If you choose a storage account, it's going to ask you how you would like to access this account name. So if you choose account name, it's going to ask you for the account name. In my case, I think it's called My Storage Go. And then the key I will paste right here. I'm just going to give this my Azure storage. And obviously it's an Azure account, it's not an Azure government. I'm going to click on the next button and then click connect. And then you can see as soon as the connection is successful, you would immediately see, I'm just waiting for it. So you would immediately see hierarchical navigation on the left-hand side, and that hierarchical navigation would allow you to be able to navigate the local to be able to navigate the information inside there as well. Okay, there's our storage account. So if you expand that, and then you can see my storage, my Azure storage. And if you remember correctly earlier, I created a global share. Remember that global share network that I told you about, or that I created? There it is. You can upload stuff from here to it. So if I upload file, so you can choose a file from your local machine, and then you can just upload it in there as well. Okay, I'm not going to be doing any other upload. If you go to the blob container, I also made a folder. And in that folder, I uploaded I think it was called financial files, where you click on it, you can see that the financial file is now uploaded in there as well. If you click on it, you can double click on it, and this would automatically open that file. So anywhere you go, you will be able to access, your files, your information on demand. And if a single storage account gives you 512 terabyte of storage. Let me say that again. 512 terabyte of storage is available for every storage account. So this is an endless storage locations for your information. It's unfortunate that in Africa our internet is not so great, so keeping all information in the cloud would be a serious possibility going forward for everyone. Okay, so I've got two more things that I want to show you. The first one is how to create a SQL server in the cloud. For some of you who have always wanted to learn SQL, and you always think that you need like a virtual machine with SQL and SQL license, well, SQL is also provided as a platform as a service. So if you go to Microsoft Azure, oh, there we go. If you go to Microsoft Azure and you choose SQL databases, you can create a SQL database. And when you create a SQL database, you would have to choose a resource group. You would have to choose a database name. So I can call it my DB. And then you would have to choose a server. So obviously, because it's a platform as a service, it's not running in a container, you can decide to create a server. So I'm going to call it my SQL server. Like so. What type of authentications you want to use? Okay, that name is already used. I'm just going to put GO at the end. I want to use SQL authentications. I'm going to call this SQL user. I'm going to give it a password. And then when I click on the OK, it would create the server on which the SQL database is going to be hosted as well. So let's quickly just go through the list. That's the SQL server that I've just created. I don't want to use Elastic Pool. Yes, I want to basically provision a storage for this database. And then I want to, these are the different types of redundancy that I want for my storage. So in our case, as a test environment, I want to use a locally redundant storage. But if you use a global geo-redundant storage, your storage will be a lot more expensive, but you would have more redundancy. How is this going to be accessed? So I can basically say that I want a public endpoint to be able to access the SQL server. And this is very important. So this add current IP address, and this is so important that it provides security for who can access the storage. So if I enable this, for example, I would need to set up the IP address of my local machine, not the private IP address. So if you go to Google and you say, what's my IP? This particular IP address Bing doesn't have that feature. So if you type what's my IP, so my router here in the house uses this public IP address to be able to access pretty much anything. So if I want only people from within this house to be able to access this particular SQL database, I would add the current IP address. So when you say yes, add the current IP address to it, it would actually choose my current local IP address and add it to it as well. So let's carry on. It's asking me if I want a Windows Defender for SQL. Well, I don't want that for now. If I want a ledger, I don't want that. I already have an identity configured. I can click on next for additional service, and you can see the database collations. You can see all the maintenance windows, and then I can go on the review page. And if this creates successfully, then you have a SQL server. And I mean, this SQL server, you can create items into it like a normal SQL server. The request has been handed over to your Azure template manager, so it's sort of running it now. And in a matter of seconds, that SQL Server database will be created and it will be ready to go. And if you want, you can perform additional configurations. Obviously, these additional configurations, you would have to wait for your SQL database to be created. And guys, please note, I know many of you would have a lot of questions in terms of, certain configuration items. This is a fundamentals course. This is just the demonstrations to show you how Microsoft Azure manages things like, all the different managed services that are available there as well. If this was an AZ204 or 104 course, there's more in-depth explanations of each and every single one of the features, what they mean. We just don't have the time to be able to go through that in this session as well. Okay, so SQL Server takes a little bit of time, and the reason is because it has to deploy the SQL server itself, and then it has to create a database on it as well. All right, so just waiting for it. In the meantime, let's go on the slide. So, all right, so we've looked at the blob storage, we've looked at the access tier for the blob storage. So there are different types of Azure database services. We have a Cosmos database, it's a global distributed database services that elastically and independently scales throughout your storage. You have a SQL database, which is the one that I'm creating now. It's a relational database. It's also a database as a service, so you are not responsible for managing the infrastructure behind the scene. You also have an Azure database for MySQL, so if you want a MySQL database, you can set up one in the cloud. You also have Postgres SQL as well, which is also a relational database, and it's open source. And then an Azure SQL Managed Instance allows you to be able to manage your existing SQL Server customer to lift and shift them to the cloud, which essentially means if they used to run this application on premises in SQL, you can move them to the cloud. In the cloud, it will be fully managed. It's evergreen, platform as a service. It preserves all the past capability, automatic patching, version update, automatic backup, high availability. Azure literally takes care of all of that. You don't have to be responsible for it. And you can also exchange your existing licenses as well. So you get discounted rate for Azure for SQL managed in the cloud. Okay, so a walkthrough here for, let's quickly go look at how far that is. Okay, so it looks like our deployment is complete. So when you click on that, you can see immediately you are taken to the overview page. And in the overview page, you can see there's a few other things that you can change here. If you scroll down, you can also see all of the other configurations that is available here. If you want to write a script, you can use the query editor here. And the query editor, it's essentially going to log you into that database. So if I click here, if you remember, I created the SQL user earlier, and boom, you have like what seemed like a local SQL server machine. So if you want to write a query, you can create a new query, and then you can essentially type that query. Okay, you can type that query. So if I say create table, and I say, let's say table employees, and I say this employee table is going to have first name, and I say last name, and then I say age. So, and then I close this. I think it's that. And if I run this, that table would automatically be created. So if I put a go here, so let's just close this quickly. Let's delete that. If I say select star from employees, and then I run this, you can see that the query succeeds. If I show the result window, there is no result whatsoever. If I come in here, I can insert so I can say the ID is going to be that, the first name is going to be Gideon, the last name is going to be my surname, and the age is going to be 10, and then who says I can't be 10-year-old? Okay, so there are ways in which you can do this. Insert into employees. In fact, if you do a select start, in fact, if you come in here and then just do a refresh, let's see, I'm running against time. Let's refresh on this page. So generally the idea here is that you can manage your SQL database right there and then. And if you want to, for some of you who are avid SQL Management Studio user, for example, which is a tool for managing SQL database, you can also go ahead and you can download, I mean, you can see the table that I've just created. That's the employee table. It's got a first name, last name. If I say insert into employees, and then I say values, so I say John Doe, and John Doe's age is 30, and then I execute this. Okay, that succeeds. So if let's just add one more person, Sarah Jones, and I put the value 40, and I run this, you can see that employee has been added. If I say select star from employees, and I run this, you can see I have 2 records that are sitting in that database as well. I can put some sort of where clause, so I can say where first name equal to John. And if I run this, it should filter and show me the first name equal to John. I can do the same thing with Sarah. I'm not sure if that Sarah is correct. So if you run, okay, yeah, Sarah with an uppercase. So there's so much you can do. So you can say where age is greater than 30. And if you run this, you get your SQL Server. So these are all the So you can also say greater than or equal to 30 if you want to include John Doe, who's also 30 years old. And if you say anything greater than 50, you should not get any result because we don't have that record in there as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is SQL as a service. That's database as a service. If you want to, like I said, you can download a SQL Server Management Studio. So it's called SQL Server Management Studio. And if you download and install your SQL Server Management Studio, you can install it as an application. You can then point the application to your SQL Server in the cloud. So there's different version of it. You have a 2019, you have a 2017. So if you click here, it will download the SQL Server Management Studio. So we plan on doing some SQL training in the future. I'm going to teach you guys how to effectively manage your data in the cloud or on-premises, whatever options that you choose as well. Okay, any questions? So finally, I see we've run out of time. I did say that we are going to go above just a little bit. Finally, I want to delete everything that I have created in the cloud. So if I come in here and then I go to resources, if I go to, let's look for my resource, not management groups. So if I go to AZ900 resource group, you will see that I have a lot of things here. I can promise you if I leave out these things for the next 4 or 5 hours, I would run out of money. So what I would usually do is I would come in, go to the Cloud Shell, and then once I am connected directly to Cloud Shell, I will delete okay, it's authenticating. All right, and if you want to see your Azure, so it's AZ Resource Group. If you press the Enter key, it's going to show you all the resource group, as you can see there. If you want to delete a resource group, you say remove AZ resource group. And then you need to specify the name. Hit tab on the name. And then here you need to specify, I think it was AZ900 resource group. And then you press the Enter key, and then you say yes, and then you press Enter. This is going to take a while depending on how much resources you have in there. But I'm anticipating that this is going to take like a minute or two, because what it does is it shuts down every single services you have, and it deletes all of them from your system as well. So remember this command. It's basically, I'm going to type it here and I'm going to put it on your on the chart. Please remember to run. So to remove your resource group is remove -AZ resource group and then -name, and then you can type the name your resource group name here. Now remember to change your resource group name, so it will be remove AZ resource group -name. It will be AZ900 for me resource group, like so. And then you can copy this, and then you can just paste it in your environment. So what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste this here so that you guys are able to okay. All right. I see I actually didn't share the book earlier, so that's the script for your Azure as well. Okay, good guys. So it looks like we have reached the end of today's session. I think the final page on the slide is really just the Azure Marketplace. So if you want to buy anything other than the services that we've looked at, like maybe other Microsoft services or virtual machines that are specific, like if you want like images that are not part of Microsoft Azure, like the images that are provided by third parties service providers, you can basically buy them from the Azure Marketplace as well. So some of the things that you can find here: open source container with specific applications in it, virtual machines and database images that are specifically configured, application built in deployment software, developer tools, and much more. There's 10,000 plus listing in the Azure Marketplace, and you can buy anything that you want from there as well. So just to do some review, in this module we've talked about Microsoft provides cloud computing services across the globe, and they represent each of their data center as a region, and regions have pairs. And then you can also have availability groups where you have multiple data center in the same regions. We talked about Azure management tools. We talked about different services that you can create in the cloud. We looked at how to create a virtual machine. We looked at how to create a virtual network, how to create a container, how to create SQL databases, how to create. So we went through a whole shebang as well, basically. So if you have any questions, remember this group is always going to be active. Feel free to ask questions on the group. We constantly monitor it. Oh, I see there's a hand up. Okay, Bilanga, you go first, and then Kafiso.
So I was wondering if are we gonna have like essential to face?
Yes.
You help us through the resources and other things we're doing today.
Sorry, can you please say that again? You were breaking.
I was wondering if are we gonna have like a face-to-face session whereby we're gonna do you gonna help us to navigate through all the resources that we were doing today, like you were demonstrating.
Okay, so first of all, the session is recorded, so my advice will be that when we're done, you can go through the session again. Secondly, there's a lab instructions that will guide you through everything that I've done today. If you remember, if you go to GitHub, Microsoft Learning, and then you go to your AZ900 there, and here you go to your instructions. I have shown this many times and I'm showing it again. I think it's important. All you guys need to do is, once this session is done, the reason why you have your Azure passes is so that you can go in and say module 1, and in fact before our next session I expect everyone to have completed module 1 and module 2, because we've done module 1 now on module 2. So and I think we stopped here at the create SQL database, so you have pretty much walkthrough 1 to walkthrough 6 to complete before our next module. And then we have to plan the physical training appropriately, and the reason is because not everybody's got money for transport to be able to come to the office. And then this medium is also great because the sessions are usually recorded, but when we do set up in-person training, we'll let you guys know in advance. Did I answer your questions, Bilanga?
Yes, no problem. We saw it.
Okay, cool. Kakiso and then Rodney.
Hi, Gino. How's it?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I remember on the last session you said there's a WhatsApp whereby you share information there. The WhatsApp group.
Yes, that's correct. Are you not in the WhatsApp group?
Yeah, how do I get access to the WhatsApp group?
Okay, so in our previous training, we shared a link to the WhatsApp group.